Hi everyone, I'm Miss Killian and this is Lesson 9, Part 1. Do you have what you need today to be successful? Let's make sure that you have something to write with and your journal. You also could use your electronic workspace. Do you have the text? Today we will continue reading We Are the Ship. If you don't have it, don't worry. So, let's begin with our welcome activity. Open up to a new page in your journal, and you are going to answer this question in a quick write. Read it as I read it aloud. What do you already know about the style of baseball played in the Negro Leagues? You're going to record your responses in your journals. Okay, so think about everything you have read in the first few chapters of We Are the Ship. Pause the screen now to answer that question in your journal. So we have already talked a lot about the style of baseball played in the major leagues. Today, we will focus on learning more about the players. I'm going to read the content framing question aloud, and you read it with me. Get ready. What does a deeper exploration of players' accomplishments reveal in 5th inning of We Are the Ship? I want everyone to look at the word accomplishments. This word right here that's on the screen. Have you heard that word before? The root word of accomplishments is accomplish. Do you know what accomplish means? Accomplish means to achieve something, okay? We are going to be learning about the accomplishments of Negro League players and why they're important. On the screen, I have a definition of accomplishment. I want you to go to your journal, wherever you're recording your vocabulary, and write the word accomplishment plus the definition. Pause the screen to write that word now. Did you get it? Okay, great. In our previous lesson, we learned about the treatment of the players by the owners. In this lesson, we will explore how the players accomplished great feats despite the many challenges that they faced. We will be referencing this word throughout. So I'm going to read the chapter title in opening quotation for 5th inning. You can read it if you want to as well. It's on the screen. 5th inning, the greatest baseball players in the world. Negro League All-Stars, the greatest untapped reservoir of raw material in the history of our game is the Black Race. Branch Rickey, owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers. The phrase untapped reservoir of raw materials, did you all hear that? Have you heard of that before? Untapped reservoir of raw material. That refers to the amount of unused talent that's held by someone or of a group. In this case, it's referring to the Black Race. I'm going to read the quote again, and I want you to think about how untapped reservoir impacts that quotation. The greatest untapped reservoir of raw material in the living history of our game is the Black Race. Branch Rickey, owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers. What does the quotation on page 41 by Branch Rickey mean? I want you to pause the screen and think about that now. Even though there was a lot of great athletic talent among African Americans, many never had the opportunity to fulfill their potential because of racism and because of discrimination. White professional baseball teams missed out on having great talent on their teams by not allowing Black players to play in the leagues. We are going to read and annotate Fifth Inning. In this chapter, the narrator tells about some of the best players in the Negro Leagues and their skills and accomplishments. Just like in previous lessons, you are going to have a focus for your annotations as you read or as you listen to me read Fifth Inning. You're going to record them in a chart, like the one I have on the screen, so that you can remember along the way who was the player and what did they accomplish or what skills did they have. So you're going to make a T-chart to capture your annotations for Fifth Inning now. On the left side, you are going to write player. And on the right side, you're going to write skills. And that new word we just talked about, accomplishments. Make your T-chart in a clean page of your journal now. Pause the screen if you need a few more minutes. I'm going to read the text aloud, and you can read it by yourself or you can listen to me. Remember to pause and record the skills and accomplishments of the Negro League baseball players as you read in the notes catcher we just created. You do not have to record the skills and accomplishments for all of the players, just the ones that stand out to you. Get your notes and your book ready for reading. On page 40 is an illustration. It's captioned Josh Gibson. I'm going to begin the first paragraph on page 41. If you ask most people what they know about the Negro Leagues, they probably won't be able to tell you much. They might name a few players like Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, or maybe Cool Papa Bell, but that's usually it. These guys were excellent players for sure, but the Negro Leagues were much more than just a few ball players. Satchel, Josh, and Cool Papa were great athletes because they played against other great athletes. Satchel Paige was one of our finest pitchers. But we had other guys who threw just as hard and even harder. Josh Gibson was a powerful hitter, but we had other fellas who could hit just as far. The Negro Leagues were full of guys who were stars in their own right. Many of our guys could have rewritten the record books if they had given the chance to play in the majors. We had a fella named George Mule Suttles, who played for the Newark Eagles. He was a biggin. We used to say he hit the ball like a mule kicks. Fans would yell, "Kick, mule, kick!" and he'd take a great big swing like Babe Ruth. He'd even thrill you when he struck out. Darn near screwed himself into the ground when he missed. But when he connected, he'd send it high and far. He killed curveballs. They would have to stop the game to measure how far they went. One of the best hitters was Norman Turkey Stearns. He was a quiet but peculiar fellow who used to talk to his bats. Turkey said his name come from the pot belly he had as a child that made him look kind of like a little turkey. He had an odd batting stance and would choke up on the bat, but he sure could bust 'em. He had more home runs, than anyone in the league. I want you to think, who are some of the players that you learned about in this section? How did they stand out? Pause the screen and think about that now. You can look at the notes and record them in your notes tracker. I'm going to record on page 41 where I learned about Norman Turkey Stearns. So I'm going to write here his name, Norman, I'm guessing his nickname's Turkey Stearns. And then I'm going to put under skills and accomplishments what his skills and accomplishments were. And it says in the text, let me go down here, he had more home runs than anyone in the league. So I'm going to record that under skills and accomplishments. Had more home runs than anyone else. Okay, so you can record Norman Turkey Stearns, or you can record any player that stood out to you on that page. Pause the screen and do that now. Page 42. This illustration is captioned William Julius Judy Johnson. I'm going to read starting at the top of page 42. We had another fellow, Judd Wilson, mean fellow, real big upper body and little old legs. His knuckles were just about in the dirt. He scared the daylights out of pitchers. He crowded the plate and wouldn't back off. Just let the ball hit him so he could get on base. He could hit that long ball too, but he had a bad temper. Always got into fights. He used to bully everyone, even the umpires. If they made a call he didn't agree with, he would go after them, chase the poor fellas all around the field. Oscar Charleston was one of the greatest ball players, black or white, in the history of the game. Certainly one of the best in his day. Many of the old-time white ball players who played against him would agree. He was like Hall of Famer Ty Cobb. He played hard and would do anything to win. He would run right over you if you were blocking the base, cut you with his spikes, and the fellow was strong. Once he tore the steering wheel off of a car. He could grab a baseball and loosen up the leather with his bare hands. He played center field and stood right behind second base. If a ball was hit over his head, he'd run back and get it. He just outrun the ball and could hit to all fields. Fans would chant, "Charlie, Charlie, Charlie," when he came to bat. Didn't matter where it was pitched. He'd get wood on it. That means he would hit it. No pitch was a bad pitch to him. Buck Leonard was the same way. Couldn't get a ball past him. Some called him the Black Gehrig. Black Gehrig refers to Lou Gehrig, who was a powerful player for the New York Yankees. He was one of our finest all-time players. Real clean fella. Didn't smoke or curse. He had a real nice swing. You could always count on him for getting on base. He killed fastballs. He was an excellent first baseman. Dick Seay and Newt Allen were two of our best second basemen, and Pop Lloyd was one of the most superb all-time shortstops in the world. They nicknamed him the Black Wagner. The Black Wagner is a great player for the Pittsburgh Pirates who could play almost any position. In Cuba, they called him El Cuchara, the shovel, because he had big hands. He would scoop up grounders, dirt, and everything and zing them at first base. Willie Wells was an excellent shortstop too. Both of those guys are in the Hall of Fame. Ray Danbridge was one of the top third basemen. He was real flashy, quite a showman. He would scoop up the ball and throw it all in one motion. We called him Squatty because he was so bow-legged. You could drive a train through his legs, but not a baseball. Judy Johnson was an outstanding third baseman too. He would charge the ball. He wasn't as flashy as Dandridge, but he always got the job done and was a very smart fellow. In the outfield, we had Ted Page, Jimmy Crutchfield, Turkey Stearns, and of course, Cool Papa Bell, who was the fastest man in all of baseball. He was like lightning. Cool Papa could circle the bases in 12 to 13 seconds. 1 minute, he was standing still on first base, and next thing you know, He was slowing up on third. More than once, he scored from first base on a bunt. He was so fast, Jesse Owens, the Olympic sprinter, wouldn't race him without his track shoes. And he was always in shape. Never had to worry about him getting tired. I want you to pause the screen now and on your own, record any of the great baseball players and their skills and accomplishments. Do that now. On the screen, you will see 2 pages from our text. These are from page 44 and 45. The caption for this text can be found on the bottom. Let's look at that caption together. I'm going to zoom in. Let's read it. The mighty Josh Gibson watches Satchel Paige pitch to Buck Leonard, Griffith Stadium, Washington, D.C., circa 1943. Circa means around. Right? Take a moment to look at this illustration and notice and wonder. Let's continue reading. I'm going to start on the bottom of 42. He could hit and had a good arm. Many folks don't know he used to be a pitcher, an old knuckleballer. He was a real quiet fellow. He wouldn't argue at all. That's why they called him Cool Papa, because he was easygoing. Behind the plate, we had highly skilled pitchers like Pepper Bassett and Josh Gibson, Quincy Troop and Roy Campanella. But Raleigh Biz Mackey was possibly the greatest defensive catcher in Negro League history. Roy Campanella, the catcher who played with Jackie Robinson on the Brooklyn Dodgers, learned everything he knew about catching from Mackey. When you saw Campy's moves behind the plate, you were seeing Mackey. He was a great technician, handled pitchers with ease, and could throw to second base from a crouch. Couldn't fool around with him. Nobody would try to steal on Biz. And the title of the illustration over here is Raleigh Biz Mackey. Let's continue reading. He'd throw you out. He didn't drop many balls either, especially fly balls. He didn't even take his mask off to catch them. Solid hitter, too. On the mound, we had fireballs like Smokey Joe Williams, Willie Foster, Rube's younger brother, Andy Cooper, Hilton Smith, Verdell Mathis, Cannonball Dick Redding, Bullet Rogan, Leon Day, and many others. But the most famous of all pitchers was Leroy Satchel Paige. He got his name Satchel when he was a boy. He used to work at the train depot, carrying folks' bags and satchels. Satchel was a masterful pitcher and by far the greatest showman. People came out by the thousands to see him pitch. If a team needed some cash, Wilkinson would send him out there to pitch a few innings for them. Satchel made a lot of money doing that. He pitched for more than 250 teams. That fellow was something else. We'd be waiting around for Satchel to show up for a game, and he was nowhere to be found. Then he'd arrive just a few minutes before game time with a police escort, sirens blazing and all. He always kept us laughing. He would walk real slow on the mound and let his arms dangle. Satchel didn't believe in running. A few times he called in the outfield and struck out the side without giving up a single hit. He was tall and skinny. If he turned sideways, he'd disappear. His arms were just as skinny around his biceps as his wrist. We used to say they were like rubber hoses or long black snakes. What I want you to do now is I want you to go back to your notes catcher, and I want you to review the text and capture some of the players that stood out to you on this page. Pause the screen now. I'm also going to record the players from page 47 that stood out to me. Okay, I got my notes. So now I'm going to continue reading the last paragraph on page 47. I'm still thinking about the players and what skills and accomplishments they had. Nowadays, pitchers pitch maybe once or twice a week and rest a few days in between. Not Satchel. He pitched every day. He lived on the mound. He said he kept his arm young by taking boiling hot showers. He would tie a big Turkish towel around his arm and let the hot water run over it. Nowadays, pitchers use ice for their arms, but back then they used heat. He always rubbed his arm with this real hot snake oil that some American Indian fellow gave him. He wouldn't give up that secret formula for anything. When Satchel pitched, he raised his big foot up high, let it come down, and then whipped the ball by you. Satchel was nothing but fastball. Even his slow stuff was fast. We knew what was coming, but we still couldn't hit it. The ball would be moving so fast it looked like a little white pill by the time it got to the plate. And it would jump just a little bit before it got to you. Just enough to make you miss it. Satchel wasn't legendary only for his speed, but also his control. If you need to, pause the screen and jot any more notes about players and accomplishments. You may want to make sure you're catching information about Satchel Paige. There's a lot of information about him on page 47. We will keep reading with the bottom of page 47. I want to show the picture that can be found on page 48 and 49. This picture has a caption as well. Let's read that caption together. There it is. Oops. Leroy Satchel Paige, Yankee Stadium, Bronx, New York, circa 1942. Do you remember what circa meant? Yes, it's around 1942. Take a moment to look at this illustration. All right, we're going to keep reading. I'm going to start with the sentence on bottom of page 47 that will lead into the sentence on the top of page 51. He could put the ball wherever he wanted to put it. Most pitchers warmed up by throwing over home plate or a glove, but Satchel used a candy wrapper or a bottle cap. A catcher only had to hold up his glove and Satchel would hit it. Satchel liked to drive fast too, drove like a demon. He'd get stopped for speeding in some small towns on his way to a game. Once he got stopped and the judge fined him $25. Satchel took out a wad of cash and started peeling off $10 bills. Told the judge, "Here's 50. I'm coming back through tomorrow." Yeah, that Satchel was something else. One of Satchel's rivals at the plate was Josh Gibson. Josh was hitting that ball out of ballparks everywhere. He hit more home runs than anybody except Turkey Stearns. Some say Josh hit the ball out of Yankee Stadium. Not even Babe Ruth did that. Babe Ruth was one of the most celebrated ball players of all time. He had the most beautiful natural swing. His body was built for hitting. Slender waist, big muscular back. He would roll his sleeves up so the pitcher could see his powerful arms. He stood flat-footed, and would just mash the ball. The ball would shoot straight up the outfield and still be on its way up as it cleared the fence. It would land about 400 to 500 feet away. If an infielder had tried to catch it before it took off, the ball would have probably taken him with it. Josh hit everything. Fastballs, curveballs, couldn't fool him. Pitchers would just have to pitch and pray. He was so good, people started calling him Mr. Black Baseball. Some even called him the Black Babe Ruth. The others say that the Babe should have been called the White Josh Gibson. Josh was a real jolly fellow. We used to say he was like a big kid, and great behind the plate too. When he started out, he wasn't as good a catcher as he was a hitter, but he wanted to become a complete player, so he really worked hard on developing his arm and, most of all, his accuracy. That means his precision, how precise he was. He became one of the better defensive players. He could pick you off at second from a crouch. The man was awesome. Pause the screen. I want you to capture notes specifically about Josh Gibson. I'm going to pause the screen and capture some notes about his skills and accomplishments now as well. So do that. All right, did you get your notes? Let's keep reading. I'm on the bottom of page 51, the last paragraph. But you know something? We had many Josh Gibsons in the Negro Leagues. We had many Satchel Paiges, but you never heard about them. It's a shame the world didn't get to see them play. The Negro Leagues were home to some of the greatest baseball players that ever lived. Guys like Stuart Slim Jones, John Beckwith, Dick Lundy, and Oliver Marcel. New Allen, Dobie Moore, Jimmy Crutchfield, Pepper Bassett, Dan and Sam Bankhead, Buck O'Neill, Bingo DeMoss, Joe Black, Roy Partlow, Ted Page, Alex and Ted Doubleday, Radcliffe, Chet Brewer, Quincy Troop, Andy Pullman Porter, Piper Davis, Walter McCoy, Mule Miles, Wild Bill Wright. There are just so many. Can't even name them all. Unfortunately, most of them will never receive the recognition they deserve. We can only hope the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown will someday open the doors to more of these fellows. So if you're working with someone, review your notes together now. I'm going to show some of my notes that I took while I was reading. You saw that I recorded about Norman Turkey Stearns when we were on page 41. I recorded how he had more home runs than anyone else in the league. I also noticed information about Satchel Paige. The illustrations helped me understand more about Satchel. Did they help you? I recorded how Satchel was a very fast pitcher and that he threw balls that were so hard to hit. I recorded about Cool Papa Bell. He was the fastest man in baseball, and I also recorded how he was an easygoing fellow. The final person I recorded about was Josh Gibson. He was a very good hitter, and he became a very good catcher through hard work. Make sure that you have recorded some of the players along with their skills and accomplishments now. We just did a lot of work reading and analyzing fifth inning. Nice job. We are going to continue the work we began earlier in this arc, where we think about the main idea or ideas of the chapter, and then we also determine the text structure that Nelson used to convey those ideas. So stop and think. Review your notes that you took just like the notes that I took, and think, what was fifth inning mostly about? You are going to capture what fifth inning is mostly about in your 3-column chart that we've been recording for each chapter. So open up to that page now and capture the main idea of fifth inning. Pause the screen and do that. Did you get the main idea? Here's what I put. This chapter is mostly about how talented the players in the Negro Leagues were, even though few people know many things about them. So be sure that you have your main idea recorded on your screen as well. Did you get it? All right. So now review your notes and think about the text structure. If you want to, you can pull back up your text structure notes where we recorded all about 5 different text structures. Do that now and think about what text structure was fifth inning mostly using. All right, what'd you say? Did you say description? Well, Nelson uses mostly description in this chapter. He tells about the talents, he describes those talents of the Negro League players. He shared stories and descriptions about different players and different positions throughout the entire chapter. Make sure that you have this text structure recorded in your notes where you're recording all the different main ideas and text structures for We Are the Ship. Record that now. So this is going to be the last time that we record main idea and text structure in our notes. Okay? It doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to think about the main ideas and text structures of each chapter. We're just going to end recording each chapter for this lesson today. We just discussed how talented the Negro League players were. They were truly some of the most talented baseball players of all time. As I said earlier in the arc, Nelson is an author as well as an illustrator. We are now going to look at some of the illustrations that he created that are in fifth inning, and we're going to see how Nelson uses these illustrations to support his main ideas. So if you have your text, you should open up to fifth inning, and we're going to look at some of those illustrations. If you don't have your text, I'll show the illustrations on the screen. We're going to begin with looking at the illustration on page 40, which is titled Josh Gibson, and then the illustration on page 43, which is titled William Julius Judy Johnson. And I want you to answer this question. How do these illustrations support the idea that the Negro League players were some of the most talented baseball players in the world? Stop, pause the screen, and analyze these illustrations with that question in mind now. What did you conclude? Let's talk about them together. Did you notice in this illustration the muscles that are being shown on Josh Gibson's arms? That indicates to me that they were strong and they were athletic players. And then when I look at the second image, the one of William Julius Judy Johnson, I notice this serious expression on his face. Let's zoom into that. Let's see if I can get my zoom. So let's look at that serious expression on his face. You see it? That shows me how important the game of baseball was to these players. Also, Josh Gibson has a serious expression on his face as well. Did you notice those things? Or maybe you noticed something different. Share what you noticed if working with someone now. Let's look at a few more illustrations. This is the illustration on page 44 and 45. It's titled, The Mighty Josh Gibson Watches Satchel Paige. Watch as Satchel Paige pitched to Buck Leonard, Griffith Stadium, Washington, D.C., circa 1943. Pause and think about the same question. How does this illustration support the main idea that Negro League players were some of the most talented baseball players in the world? Think about that now. Well, one thing that stands out to me right away are these 3 bats. Do you all see those 3 bats? Okay, so it makes me think, what 3 bats? He must be a strong player. He also probably is intimidating the other teams by doing this with those 3 bats, like showing that he's ready to mash the ball, as the text had said. Let's see if we can find more evidence in the text to support our understanding of Josh. 51 is on the screen, along with the illustration that we just looked at that shows Josh Gibson. See if you can reread the paragraph that starts with one of Satchel's rivals and find text evidence that supports this illustration's main ideas. Reread it now, and then we'll discuss. So what'd you find? Let's go into the text. I like down here, it talks about the swing he had. He had the most beautiful natural swing. And what's he doing in the picture? He's kind of getting ready to swing. His body was built for hitting. Look at how Nelson drew his body. Similar to the other illustrations, you can see his muscles. You can see that he's built for hitting. He has a slender waist, and it shows that he's getting ready, as I said before, to mash the ball. You see how the illustration supports the main idea? If so, give a thumbs up. Nice work. We've done a lot of work analyzing the main ideas as well as how the illustrations support those main ideas. We're moving into our check for understanding. This is where you are now going to independently look at an illustration from 5th inning. You're going to look at the one titled Leroy Satchel Paige, Yankee Stadium, Bronx, New York, circa 1942. I'll put it on the screen in a moment. Once you look at that illustration, you're then going to do a quick write. And you're going to think, how does this illustration relate to the main ideas from 5th inning, and build your knowledge of the Negro Leagues? It's the same thing we've been doing with the earlier illustrations. This time, you're going to do it on your own. So I am going to put on the screen now, page 48 and 49. If you have your text, you can turn to that page. I'm also going to put the text from page 47, which talks about Leroy Satchel Paige, so that you can compare the illustration to the text. Let's get ready to move into our check for understanding. Okay, pages 48 and 49, the illustration are on the screen. I've also included the caption because it's hard to see. The caption is Leroy Satchel Paige, Yankee Stadium, Bronx, New York, circa 1942. On your own, in a clean page in your journal, you are going to answer that question. How does the illustration relate to the main ideas from 5th inning, and build your knowledge of the Negro Leagues? Do that now in your journal. The text is also there for you to reference. All right, did you get your quick write? Great. So now you need to check your work. When we check our work, we go back, we reread what we wrote, and we think, how can we make it better? I'm going to put some criteria up for you to think about. Okay, check your work. It's right over there. Did you connect the elements of the illustration to the main ideas of the chapter? Reread your work now to see if you did that or you didn't do that. If you need to, edit your writing to make sure you connect those main ideas. Did you explain how the illustration deepens your knowledge of the Negro Leagues? Reread and edit as needed. Nice job checking your work and ensuring that you're making the needed edits. Let's discuss this check for understanding together. So, what did you choose? I noticed that this illustration is supported with the text. In this paragraph, talking about Satchel, it says, his arms were just as skinny around his biceps as his wrist. You can see Satchel, tall and skinny, in that illustration. I also noticed that in the illustration, there are lots of people in the stadiums watching him. In the text, it discusses how Satchel would draw large crowds. I'm going to reread this section. Satchel was a masterful pitcher and by far the greatest showman. People came out by the thousands to see him pitch. We can surely see the illustration supports the text, that there are lots of people that want to see this amazing baseball player play. We're going to end our work together today with a thinking question, and we're going to leave it sit until our next lesson. What might have happened if the players had the opportunity to play in the major leagues? If you're working with someone, you can discuss. If not, just keep it up here. That's something we'll talk about in future lessons. In our next lesson, we're going to notice and wonder about sixth inning, which is the next chapter, and we're going to compare how Negro League players were treated in different locations. If you have any questions, reach out to me at info@greatminds.org. And as always, thank you for learning with me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.